So, picks and tensioners. My first set was the TOOOL Necessary 9. It's these here, plus Z-bars. It's pretty much the same as the Covert Instruments Genesis set. From my understanding, it is same manufacturer. I don't know if Covert Instruments makes them in-house or shops them out, but I believe either they are making them for TOOOL or TOOOL is using the same source as Covert Instruments. You get the 2 rakes, 4 picks, and 3 tensioners. And these are Z-bars, so they do bottom and top of keyway. And 30, 40, and 50 thousandths. Z-bars are excellent. I had issues with them at first. I was picking in hand and picking padlocks because that's where most people start with padlocks, hand in hand. I found that top of the keyway would often pop out, especially in something like the American Lock 1100. I'd get partway in and boom, this would be flying across the room. So I ended up disliking these to start. However, they are actually one of the better tension tools because you're applying tension on end. You want to use as thick as will fit in the keyway. So you're applying tension along the edge. You have the full thickness. It's not going to bend. And it will give you much more feedback coming back. With flat bars, you're applying tension and you're bending along the thin. And if I applied like this, I could bend this if I wanted to. Whereas if I try that with this, I don't have high hopes for that. Probably would not be able to. So the Z-bars end up giving much better feedback. Then you get things like the Moki heavy bars. These start approaching thicknesses where it doesn't really matter. Bending this, I might be able to just because this is long enough, I'm getting good leverage, but in here, no, not gonna happen. My recommendation is Z-bars. If you are gonna be picking in hand, then ergo turners like these from Covert Instruments are gonna be decent for you. I don't actually recommend these for in a vise. These ended up being not terribly useful for me because I bought them because I didn't like the Z-bars for top keyway. These did end up staying in easier for me, but then once I started picking door locks in a vise, they became much less useful. They're not a bad thing. And if you like picking in hand, yes, I definitely recommend them. Being able to put your finger across like this rather than having it straight up like that is much more comfortable. But if you're going to be picking in a vise like I do, I'd say Z-bars and heavy flats. And I think the Mokis are top notch. They're long, they're really well made. For the picks themselves, the Necessary 9 is actually a pretty decent starter set. Compared to the Genesis, you get 2 extra picks. You get the spoon and you get the half diamond. I modified the half diamond and the medium flat slightly, so they'll look a little different than what I got here. But the spoon and the round are the same, and then same with the rakes. These two aren't people's top picks. I mean, the spoon can be kind of nice for people starting out, a little handy for reaching under zero lifts if you need to. I haven't really found much of a need for it. I have taken to really liking the half diamond. I have rounded off the very end of it so that it doesn't catch on anything when I leverage it. I've ended up using this a fair bit, especially for the twisting technique that I end up using on like the Gold P, the Gold Z, ASA 600 with gins. The Genesis does not have that, just these 4. You get a case instead of these 2 picks. But if you're doing this just in your home, apartment, whatever, don't have much use for a pick case. I ended up buying a Sparrows and found it's just sitting here taking up space. There's no meets around me to go to. I mean, I wish there were, but so I'm not taking my picks anywhere. It's not like I use them for everyday carry or anything like that. For me, it's not a direct, one or the other. It really depends on your circumstances. If you think you need a case, Genesis is great. If you don't, I would actually go for the Necessary 9, because you never know if you end up falling in love with either of these. Next, I got Sparrows Monkey Paws, which have the stepped tip on them. I haven't liked that terribly much. I find that you have 2 points where you can catch the tip of the pin. So if you're pulling this along and you're not sure exactly how far down the pin is in its chamber, when you catch something, it's like, are you catching it here? Are you catching it there? These are so close together, it's really hard to tell by feel where it's catching. It could be on warding. I ended up filing the end down a bit, so now it's more of an angle, sort of like a gem or pointed, depending on. So I find this more comfortable because you don't get a distinct catch at the lip with it rounded off. I plan on modifying the rest of these in a similar manner. One drawback to the TOOOL, Covert Instruments, and the Sparrows are the shoulders. You'll see that a right angle, not quite a right angle because it's rounded here, but it's within the handle here, so it's a little hard to see sometimes, but better when you're comparing it to something like a Jimy Longs. You can see how it's got a very nice sloped shoulders. Jimmy had posted on his website the result of analysis on how the force behaves on the pick. Anytime you have a sharp angle like this, it creates a weak point. This is going to break. That's going to be a likely place for it. If they were the same thickness, this will be much stronger, more stable. These happen to be 15 thou, so they're pretty light. Right now, Jimmys are hard to get a hold of. I got lucky with those. Unfortunately, I don't own any Moki picks. However, if you're looking for a first set, the Jimmy's Basic are great if he has them available. Hopefully once he gets his sourcing straightened out, they'll be available on a more regular basis. But Moki's Gold Digger on the less expensive side. And then if I was starting over right now and didn't have any of these, but knew what I knew now, I would get the Moki Reverend Set. They're 301 high yield steel. He has in the handle another pick tip cut in, so you can snap off the outer part of the handle portion. You'll have another pick if you break the tip. Basically, it's 2 picks in one. They're the same pick, but it has its own replacement built into it. I think that's just an amazing idea. I believe he's got more thicknesses available now, but last I looked, they were 19 thou. I would not recommend 15 thou to beginners because there's a tendency to use way too much force on your picks and way too much tension and end up bending picks. So 15 thou are not going to hold up. 25, that's what the Necessary 9 are. Genesis are. They hold up really well, and both of those are 301 high yield as well. But they have a little bit more trouble fitting into some of the narrower keyways, the paracentric ones that are all squiggly. But 19 or 20, that's what these Sparrows are. They're pretty stable. There's some debate over whether Sparrows actually uses 301 high yield. For the Monkey Paws, they just say 280 kpi. These have held up pretty well. I have not bent them, definitely not broken them. And I've abused these fairly well. So I suspect at least these are 301 high yield, not full hard. But again, do your research on that if you're going to go the Sparrows route. In addition to the good thickness, he's got both flat and pointed tips. The flat are great for when you're starting out or if you just want some of the extra stability because you have a flat portion for the point of the pin to sit on and you don't have to be super precise of where the pick is. And then also has a set of pointed in there, which are really nice for when you're going to get super precise on some of the advanced locks or you need to sneak into a really tight keyway. So you get both picks that are going to be good to start off with and picks that take you black belt and beyond. I picked black belt locks using these and a couple of the Monkey Paws. Actually, I don't even think this one. So I think I've used those two and that. these are the majority of what I use. Or maybe this one too. Yeah, because I got the marks on there. So brown, red, black, I've mostly have done that. So you don't need some of the super pointies to do the majority of locks, even things like, S700 and Gold Z, that kind of thing. But it's definitely nice to have them. There's no rakes in the Reverend Set. So rakes are nice to have in certain circumstances. Some people have fun raking locks. I found it was interesting the first few times I tried it and then lost all interest. I have used it on a small format interchangeable cylinder to try to get it open to control because it's in a housing and I don't have a control key for it, so I can't get it out. I could rake it to open, but sometimes you get lucky, you can rake it to control, but so far I haven't had any luck with it. That's about the only use I have for a rake at this point. Having two rakes, kind of useless for me. Because even 4 versus 5, you just move the 4 more. You can't use rakes for belts past, orange. So personally, I don't think taking up slots that where it could be a pick instead that you might find useful. And then you have things like the Valyrian set from Law Lock. I see that recommended a lot. They make good stuff, but that set in particular, I personally don't recommend because of how many rakes are in it. If you're not an entry specialist or a locksmith, basically using it on locks that you shouldn't be picking unless you're hired to do so, it's not a set that's really going to be terribly cost effective because of so many slots that are taken up by rakes that could be picks instead, or just simply cheaper. And then in the Reverend Set, you get both Z-bars and pry bars. So you're going to have exactly the type of ones that I recommend using. And you don't have to buy any additional. I own Moki tensioners, but I don't own any Moki picks yet. However, based on what others have said about it and just the specs I've read and knowing what's in it, I feel pretty confident in recommending them. I would like to own some at some point. I do have some of his pick blanks that I'm making some picks out of, but don't have any of his actual picks yet. So you may notice that these are pretty fat. I find with my hands, anything small, difficult to deal with. These are the ones I bought in the 90s. Back then, I think I raked open 2 or 3 locks, and then pretty much that's all I did. They just fell on the wayside. These are pain. Cut India, I tried wrapping them with some tape just to make them a little usable, but this is the way a lot of them come. So the Sparrows will be like this. Easier view of the type of shoulders I'm talking about on those. And this is just no fun to try to do anything with. The TOOOL and Covert Instruments are a bit better because they have the scales on them. Kind of see there, which makes them a little bit thicker, but I still find the length a little short. So I designed and printed out these handles. Currently, I've got a few different sizes. I'm planning on uploading more. These haven't even been trimmed, but I find them much easier to deal with. I tend to pick overhanded just because it's more comfortable with my hands and the type of tremors I got. The DBS does help with more broad tremor, but sometimes my thumb will start going or whatever, and I find picking like this, I'm more likely to have my thumb start going, which then gets the rest of my arm going even with the DBS, which can be a real pain. So I find an overhand grip much easier. Trying to hold this overhand, it ends up in the palm, and it's really uncomfortable. I don't have any control over it. It's just kind of free in there. Even with my fingers on it, it's really hard to get a good position. Whereas with a nice fat and long handle, I got a nice grip on it. Plus my hands, sometimes I'll just lose muscle tension, so I'll just drop things. With the thicker handles, I'm much more likely to hold on to it. Whereas with the thin stuff, I'll just drop it. And in this direction, it doesn't cut into your thumb webbing or anything like that. And it's long enough that the times you want to reach forward with it, it doesn't just drop past or anything like that. Everyone likes different, but I didn't find any handles big enough, so I know. So now there's a variety, because there's a fair number that are the similar size to like what Peterson has. So it's just nice to have a variety. Lawlock and Moki are already large. With the Mokis, you can get handles right from him, and you just screw them on. To me, they look excellent. Like they would work for me, and I wouldn't need any special handles on them. I might end up doing something a little bit thicker. I do want to give them a try at some point. Jimy's, he makes wonderful stuff. He's got the resin handles, injection molded on it. Unfortunately, it does mean that you can't make your own handles put on it. I find these okay. I can pick with them. They're not as comfortable as these, but they're not anywhere near as uncomfortable as unhandled, even Covert Instruments, and especially Sparrows. I would like them just a little bit longer for in my palm, because I would like it coming about there, and a little bit thicker because I kind of lose track about the rotation, where it is. If I was picking like this, they'd be about perfect for me. So there are times when I do pick like this, and these are perfectly fine for that. I really haven't used these much because they're so thin. I'm reserving these for, basically you want to use as thick as will fit in the keyway as you can get away with both tensioners and picks, just because you want as much feedback, and you want to lower the risk of bending or breaking things as much as possible. That covers it on picks and tensioners. So, thanks.